All right, this is going to be a short video for part 5. And so what I'm going to do is go through the instructions for part 5. And then I'm going to show you guys how to do a pivot table and how to come up with your questions. And so this is obviously going to come from your data, from your sample that you've collected. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that you do need 10 questions, and only 2 of them should be simple questions. And simple questions would be, like A over here, what is the probability of randomly selecting a male from your sample? That is a simple probability question. You should have more of the N questions, like the B. So what is the probability of randomly selecting a participant that is female and has a college degree? You also should have more of the, like, part C, which says what is the probability of randomly selecting a participant as female or identify as Democrats? And these questions should be formulated based on your interest, based on your topic. You should also have conditional probability questions, at least 2 of them. And those are the ones that, what is the probability of selecting a male given that we selected someone that has a college degree? And that's conditional probability, because it's the probability of selecting a male is conditioned on whether or not we choose someone with a college degree. I believe the due date might be accurate, but just like the other ones, we can always tweak those due dates. And so I'm going to go to Excel. This file will be available to you guys. Now, when you do this, the thing that you have to do is you can only choose qualitative variables. You cannot choose quantitative variables to create a pivot table. Because the pivot table, they do not automatically put all of the values into classes, but it does that for the qualitative. So it's kind of weird. So first thing you want to do is you want to create a new sheet. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick 2 qualitative variables, sorry. I'm going to pick race ethnicity. So I'm going to copy this into my sheet. Let me move this again, I'm sorry. I'm going to expand it so we can actually see everything. And so I have ethnicity, and so the next thing that I'm going to pick is the question on police. Now, of course, like I said before, this should be based on what your interests are. You can probably get at least 5 questions per pivot table. You need 10 questions, so you can create 2 of these and you should be fine. So once I have my 2 variables that I've decided to sort of find out what's happening, what relationship exists between these 2 variables as far as, who agrees with this, who disagrees with this. And so we can actually find that out, and we're going to create a pivot table. A pivot table is also known as a contingency table. You're going to have to look at chapter 4 to be able to complete part 5. So these, if I end up making more than one video, they're not a substitute for looking and reading chapter 4. This is more of okay, this is how you do this in Excel to come up with what you learned from chapter 4. Okay, so once you have your 2 variables, now another thing that I want to caution against is getting more than 2 variables. If you can do 3, I personally think that the pivot table becomes too busy, and there's just too much going on, and I don't like to look at that. If we do this, it's just easier to look at it, and you'll see that in a moment. So once you choose your 2 variables, just highlight both of the variables. So both columns highlighted. And then I want to go into Insert. And then over here it says Pivot Table. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Pivot Table. And what this is going to do is it's going to ask me, okay, well, what do you want? And so I already have the 2 columns that I want Excel to look at. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to tell Excel to put it in this worksheet, right? And so I click Existing Worksheet. I'm going to click that here. I'm going to kind of move this over. And I'm just going to pick a few cells. It doesn't matter. You can just click on one if you want to. Excel will still put it in the space that it needs. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now, when I do that, you'll notice that I get this opening over here, this menu. What you're going to do is you're going to pick one of them to go into, I'm going to put ethnicity in rows, and I'm going to put the responses to the question in the columns. Now, so choose one of the variables, put it in the columns, choose the other variable, put it in the rows, and then choose either of the two and put it into values. If you don't put it into values, your table is just going to be empty. You're going to have your rows with the labels in your column, but that's it. You're not going to have anything else. So I'm going to close this out, and then I'm going to scroll over here, and you're going to see that I have my contingency table, my pivot table in Excel. Now, what I also want to do is I want to get rid of the blank because there's nothing there. It's just an extra row and column. So if I click on this drop-down menu here, unclick blank, and click OK, my table sort of shrinks a little bit. One of the things that you want to do is if you choose, one of the variables has a lot of choices, you might want to put that in rows. Because if you put it in columns, then your table is going to be really long, and then you're going to have to be scrolling to see everything. So, okay, so now that I have my table, the next thing that I'm going to do is, the dogs might bark because there's a child outside screaming. I don't know why. And so, I forgot what I was going to say. Let me get my thought process back again. All right, let me just start at this point. Sorry about that. And so I'm going to do a simple question, right? And the simple question would be, what is the probability of choosing a Latino from this sample? And so what I want to do is, here I have in this row, these are my Latinx participants. And I go all the way to the last row and column here, the intersection of the grand total. And I have 11 participants that, or respondents that said identify as Hispanic or Latino. And so if I do the probability of, I'm going to put H for Latino, and then I look at this, I have 11 divided by 38. And so the probability of randomly choosing someone who identifies as Hispanic or Latinx is 11 out of 38. Now, what I would do is I would put that as a percentage. And so you can see that I have about a 29% chance of randomly choosing a participant that identifies as Latino. So that's a simple question. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to pick the probability of Hispanic, and I'm going to use this one for and I am going to say, and disagrees with the question, right? And so, again, what I'm looking for here is an and has to have both traits, right, at the same time. And so what I want to do then is I want to, again, look at the row of Hispanic or Latinx, and then I'm going to go to the intersection of Hispanic and disagree, and I have 1, and so the probability for this would be 1 out of 38, because 38 is my total. So then this would be 1 divided by, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. 1 divided by 38. And so here, if I do this, I can find out my, let me just do this so I can just have 2 decimal places off the bat. Sorry about that. Nope, that's not what I want. I don't know how many I'm going to have, so I just want to have 2. Okay, so that's the and type of question, right? So you look for the intersection of the 2 traits that you're looking for. One of them is going to be the row, one is going to be the column. You look at that intersection, and then it's over to total. So for Hispanic and disagree would be the intersection of disagree and Hispanic divided by the total number of participants, which is 38. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to find out, okay, what's the probability of randomly choosing a Hispanic or someone that is neutral, right? In other words, they don't really have an opinion of what's happening. So here, you have to be careful with this particular one because this particular formula has three parts, right? The first one is, and I'm going to do it over here, is the probability of Hispanic or Latino. And you can see that it's 0.29. So I got to put 0.29, right? Then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find neutral, right? How many respondents said they were neutral? And if I see here, I look at the column of neutral is going to be 6 divided by 38. And so I'm going to go ahead and write it this way, right? Now, the next thing is that I have to subtract the participants that are Hispanic and neutral because otherwise I'll double count it. So that would be, again, I go to my column here, neutral is 3 out of 38. And so the probability here, it's about 37%. So again, probability of Hispanic, right? Plus probability of neutral minus the probability of Hispanic and neutral. Otherwise, you would double count it. All right, and the last one that I'm going to do, and I should be able to finish it before my 15 minutes are up for this thing, is the probability of Hispanic given that they disagree, right? And so the formula for this one is the probability of Hispanic and disagree divided by the probability of disagree. And the nice thing about it is that you're going to see that I don't really need to do this formula, so I'm going to do it both ways. So the nice thing is that I already have the probability of Hispanic and disagree, which is 0.03, and that's in the second one that I did. Divided by the probability of disagree, and the probability of disagree, if I go to the column, is going to be 5 divided by 38. And I get a 0.23. I'm going to show you a different way of doing it. When I do this one, my denominators disagree. So instead of looking at the 38, I'm going to look at the 5. And so I'm going to say, okay, well, how many? There are 5 participants that disagree. How many of those are Latinx? And so I go over here and I see that I have a 1 out of 5. So then it's going to be 1 divided by 5. Let me make sure I got all this right. The probability of Hispanic and disagree is 1 out of 38. Let me do this again. 1 out of 38. And then the probability of disagree is 5 out of 38. And if I divide those two, should get my answer. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there with the 0.23. And so again, what I can do then, my sample space, my denominator changes. It changed from the 38 to the 5, because that's my denominator if you think about the fraction h over d. And then I look, well, what's the h, right? And the h is 1 over 5. So it's 2 ways of doing this. So remember, 10 questions, 2 simple ones. What's the probability of Hispanic? What's the probability of female? And then the rest of them should be more involved. Okay? And that's the end of this one. Thank you.